because I was not going to life sentence, period. Life with or without, I wouldn't be happy with that.
The dragging death of James Byrd Jr., 13 years later, Lawrence Russell Brewer, the first defendant to receive an execution date, has granted his first interview. Good evening, I'm Ray Bolger.
And I'm Bill Lachey. Thank you for joining us. September 21st, sometime after 6 in the evening on that date, Lawrence Russell Brewer is scheduled to die by injection in Huntsville for a hate crime that made headlines across the nation and the world. Brewer is one of 3 men convicted of capital murder for the dragging death of James Byrd Jr. Byrd was tied with a chain and dragged for several miles down Huff Creek Road on the outskirts of Jasper. It was June 7, 1998. Law enforcement officers quickly arrested Lawrence Russell Brewer, John William King, and Sean Allen Berry. All 3 were convicted of capital murder. Berry got a life sentence. King and Brewer received the death penalty. A judge recently set Brewer's execution date for September. That prompted KFDM News to seek an interview with the convicted killer, and he agreed. A spokeswoman for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice said to their knowledge it was his first interview. KFDM reporter Lindsay Kovacevic and photographer Drew Barrio traveled to death row in Livingston 2 weeks ago. She joins us now with her special report. Lindsay?
Bill, Lawrence Russell Brewer was 31 years old when he took part in the murder of James Byrd Jr. Brewer is now 44. His life for the past 13 years spent primarily in a small cell on death row. He answered all of our questions about the crime, about his ties to what investigators call a white supremacy group, his thoughts about execution. We also spoke with former Jasper County Sheriff Billy Rolls to help put some of Brewer's answers in perspective. Answers the former sheriff told us are not supported by the evidence.
No, I don't regret going there.
Huff Creek Road.
I'd go to Jasper.
On the outskirts of Jasper, Texas. A winding, tree-lined road. Peaceful. An image that was shattered by a crime so graphic it became known across the country and the world.
That's all I could see whenever I looked out the sliding glass window in the truck with Sean bending over a pair of ankles.
Many call it a modern-day lynching with a chain instead of a rope. The dragging death of James Byrd Jr., June 7, 1998.
I know in my heart I participated in assaulting her, and I didn't have to do it. I had nothing to do with the killing as far as the dragging or driving the truck or anything.
The words of Lawrence Russell Brewer, 13 years later, offering his version of the events. The first time he's given an interview from prison, the Polensky unit in Livingston, death row, surrounded by razor wire, guard towers. Brewer's home beginning in September of 1999.
Literally since Sean Berry was a knife to Bird's throat.
Brewer has stuck to that story since his capital murder conviction.
There was absolutely no throat cut. Scratches on the throat where a knife had done it.
Billy Rolls was the Jasper County Sheriff when Byrd was dragged to his death. He investigated every detail of the case, working hand in hand with Guy James Gray, the district attorney at the time.
He was communicating with Guy James and I that Byrd was already there when they put the chain on him. And that just didn't happen. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence for that at all. 24 and a half inches.
What the evidence showed is that Byrd was alive when he was tied to a chain and dragged behind a pickup truck down Huff Creek Road. It was an agonizing death. Byrd struggled to hold himself up by his elbows. The ground chipped away at his bones. His body swung from side to side until it struck a culvert and came apart.
It began here and ended 2.5 miles down this road. It brings back memories for the sheriff, memories he wants to put to rest.
A lot of bad memories right here. I still remember walking from the body was right there in the middle of the road right there. It was sickening. As far as any regrets, no, I have no regrets. No, I would do it all over again, to tell you the truth.
And what would Brewer say to the Byrd family?
Absolutely nothing. Only one possibility would be I would have liked to have spoke with the mom and the father, tell them face to face exactly what happened, in private, instead of in front of it, through the media, through the courts, going through all those trials, and still absolutely zero remorse. I mean, that's just so far over my head, I can't comprehend it. Confederate flag and like a crossbone and the intertwined KKK.
Rolls and others close to the case say to understand more about Brewer, more about what led to the crime, you can look at the tattoos that cover his body. They tell a story of hate.
I wouldn't consider it a white supremacist. I would say more or less a separatist.
Brewer joined the Confederate Knights of America when he was in prison, years before he ended up in Jasper. He says the group molded him, molded his views about blacks and other minorities.
I personally came out of prison after being there for 4 years on video one and watching the blacks and the Mexicans, the other races, literally beat people near death. So I come out after 4 years of that, and with that mentality, every black and Mexican I seen was like, hatred toward them. So I just wanted to be, around white people.
Beliefs branded on his body, showing his loyalty to the Confederate Knights.
If you're a member, then you got to identify yourself. Everyone will recognize you.
Now, Lawrence Russell Brewer will be forever linked to the murder of James Byrd Jr.
Still pray for the people who are Jasper, because I'm telling you, we still carrying these scars. They're not done. It's a shame that everybody can't accept life that way. To treat all people with respect and dignity, and that would be my prayer.
A prayer the former sheriff says is unanswered because of the events that took place on this logging road 13 years ago.
Former District Attorney Guy James Gray and former Jasper County Sheriff Billy Rules visited Brewer in prison a few weeks ago. They wanted to meet with him one last time to make sure, in their words, they got it right, that when Lawrence Russell Brewer is executed, there would be no questions in their minds that he is guilty of capital murder for the dragging death of James Byrd Jr. They spent a couple of hours talking with Brewer and listening, and are convinced they did get it right. Coming up tomorrow on KFDM News at 6, you'll hear Brewer's thoughts about his upcoming execution and what it's been like on death row. Reporting live in the studio, Lindsay Kovacevic, KFDM 6 News.
I'm going to blend this blender in my blender.
There's a lot of useless stuff online. Finally, something useful. Texas.gov. Renew your vehicle registration, driver license, print your driver record, and take it online, Texas.
It is the most you'll ever walk in your entire life without your hands behind your back. And it keeps getting worse every day in heaven.
Brewer talking about his life on death row, a life that could come to an end next month. Good evening, I'm Larry Bowman.
And I'm Bill Leger. Thank you for joining us tonight. 44-year-old Lawrence Russell Brewer is confined to death row in Livingston, waiting for Wednesday, September 21st, the date when he is scheduled to die by injection. Brewer is one of 3 men convicted of capital murder for the dragging death of James Byrd Jr. Byrd was tied to a chain, first by his neck, then his ankles, and dragged for several miles down Huff Creek Road on the outskirts of Jasper. It was June 7, 1998. Law enforcement officers quickly arrested Lawrence Russell Brewer, John William King, and Sean Allen Berry. All 3 were convicted of capital murder. Berry got a life sentence. King and Brewer received the death penalty for the hate crime that made headlines across the nation and the world. When a judge recently set Brewer's execution date, it prompted KFDM News to request an interview. Brewer agreed. Last night, you heard from the convicted killer for the first time since his trial 12 years ago. KFDM reporter Lindsay Kovacevic is here with the second part of her special report. Lindsay?
Bill, Lawrence Russell Brewer spends 22 hours a day in his cell. Brewer calls his upcoming execution a way out. Tonight, you'll hear about his life on death row, how he feels about the death penalty, and his thoughts about the moment when he is strapped to a gurney and executed, with at least one family member of James Byrd Jr. watching.
Prison life for Lawrence Russell Brewer.
There's no laugh at all in here. It's like living in a cement storage shed.
A 60-square-foot cell on death row at the Blunsky unit in Livingston.
Confined to a concrete cell for 22 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Secluded from the 300 death row inmates and the 2,500 other prisoners inside this razor-wire fence who don't have a date with death.
All the time he said in his life, death row, a life that he's come to an end. And all the time he said that.
And Bill Leger, thank you for joining us tonight.
I'm just
44-year-old Lawrence Russell Brewer is confined to death row in Livingston waiting for women.
Former Jasper County Sheriff Billy Rolls reacting to the interview with Brewer.
As far as I'm concerned with people, because I will not see him again. He did wrong.
The Dragging Death investigation was his life for years. Recently, he met with Brewer to make certain, in his mind, Brewer deserves to die.
He said I'm married. He said I'm married to go. I was there. I was a part of it. And that's what happens to people that do that. So he's ready to go, and I'm ready to get it over with. Some days I'm wishing for a date to come, and some days I'm not wishing for a date. So now that it's here, I'm willing to accept it. That's my punishment.
Brewer is scheduled to die by injection September 21st for the dragging death of James Byrd Jr. What are Brewer's views about the death penalty? They might surprise you.
I'm for the death penalty. I believe if you take a lot, you should pay for it with your own life. If you actually get the effect.
Brewer maintains he didn't take part in killing Byrd on June 7, 1998. The facts at his trial and the investigation contradict that.
This is a bit hard for me because I was not going to life sentence period. Life with or I wouldn't be happy with that.
So Brewer waits for the day when he's escorted down this hallway and into the death chamber in Huntsville. He'll be strapped to a gurney, an IV placed in his arm. Brewer will get a chance to make a final statement before a combination of drugs, a lethal cocktail, flows into his body until he is pronounced dead.
Yeah, I'm glad it's not coming
to an end, isolated in a room at a prison in Huntsville, about 100 miles away from a road where James Byrd Jr. suffered alone, the victim of a hate crime that made his name known across the world, a world still working to learn from what happened here in Jasper, Texas.
While on death row, Brewer has no physical contact with other inmates. Prisoners are fed 3 times a day. A guard puts the tray through a slot in their cell door. Recreation is separated, but oftentimes inmates try to yell across the yard and pass notes to each other on a string. Now that Brewer has an execution date, he's been moved to another area on death row with even greater security. Brewer will be transferred to the Rolls unit in Huntsville on the day of his execution. We're told the sister of James Byrd Jr. will be among those watching his lethal injection. Reporting live in the studio, Lindsay Kovacevic, KFDM 6 News.
Some people have criticized our decision to interview Lawrence Russell Brewer and broadcast some of his comments. They've told us the report serves no purpose and Brewer doesn't deserve the attention. We spoke with Betty Boatner, sister of James Byrd Jr. She told us the world must never forget what happened. The family wants people to talk about the crime against James Byrd Jr. She said we must learn from history. She told us the crime doesn't reflect on Brewer's parents. It's not their fault. I met with his dad at trial. Whatever punishment he was given, that's the law. Brewer needs to make peace with himself before he meets his maker. And referring to Brewer, she said, I don't hate him. I really feel sorry for him because of the path he chose. His life had to be so miserable that he had to join a group that hated someone so much he'd take their life. She added, even though people give you the ammunition to hate, I refuse to. Hate is like cancer, it will eat you up. Shortly after the newscast, we'll post tonight's story and more comments from the Byrd family.